All right, everybody, this is a little bit of a short notice video, I guess you could say, talking about my favorite plays on the UFC Fight Night card coming up tomorrow. UFC Denver, Cortez versus Namajunas, or Namajunas versus Cortez, however you want to say it. UFC Denver, Namajunas versus Cortez. I have this broken down into two separate sections. Now, I could have given you a slide for every single fight, but I don't think that this type of video is in need of that. So what I'm going to do is I have one screen, which you see right now, which is my favorite plays. And then on the second screen, I have the long shot plays. So the long shots, everything is over plus 800. Everything is over plus 800. These are some pretty juicy numbers as well, but I'm going to go through each one that I have listed here and explain my reasoning behind it. So we'll start it off with the top one, the guy in the thumbnail of this so-called picture, and it's Christian Rodriguez money line over Julian Arosa. He opened up at minus 200, minus 190, somewhere around there. And I get the love for Julian Arosa, but at the same time, I think styles make fights, and it depends on the stylistic matchup. And I don't really see a reason to play Arosa unless you're playing Julian Arosa by sub. And I don't think C-Rod is going to get submitted by Julian Arosa. I think that C-Rod, he could get in some trouble because, you know, Arosa likes to get into firefights. He likes to throw those long, rangy punches, you know, long 1-2s down the middle, 3-2. He's very long and tall. He's a lot bigger and longer than a guy like Rodriguez. But Rodriguez is so, you know, good at staying calm in the middle of a firefight and staying patient and finding his openings. Now, he doesn't have finishes inside the UFC. I should say he doesn't have a lot of finishes. But I think if there's one guy on the roster that he's able to find a finish against, it's a guy who's been knocked down in almost every single one of his losses in Julian Arosa. I think Christian Rodriguez has the patience to work his way into the pocket, rip the body, come over the top with a right hand, throw the 1-2 down the middle, switch stances between orthodox and southpaw. And I think the straight punches of Christian Rodriguez in round 2 and round 3 are going to find the chin of Arosa, and I think he's going to knock him out. Now, the only reason I didn't put C-Rod by TKO round 2, round 3, because that was one of my initial plays at like plus 650, is because we've seen Arosa get finished in the first round so many times, and he can be caught cold, and I think there's a world where C-Rod lands a big 1-2 down the middle in the first round and catches Julian Arosa and knocks him out. So I love Christian Rodriguez on the money line. I think you get a lot of value there. I think anything under minus 300, he's definitely a parlay piece and a good play. But I think Christian Rodriguez by TKO, it was at plus 300. It's at plus 270 now. A lot of these numbers are coming off of FanDuel while I'm recording this. So yeah, that's my reasoning behind the first two plays. Up next, the other guy in the thumbnail or the screen or whatever of this part of the video, Gene Silva. I like Gene Silva by knockout over Drew Dober. I like the money line. I actually played the money line early at plus 130. Like the day that it opened up, I put him in a parlay. And I wouldn't play the money line now. I think you probably should fish for KO 2-3, which is something else I have listed here. KO by itself is juicy enough if you're looking for a single play at plus 200. KO 2-3 is at plus 550. I just looked at these numbers right now as well, so these are all fresh numbers going into tomorrow night. I think Gene Silva is going to knock out Drew Dober. Drew Dober's got the UFC experience. What's the one thing we know about recent fighters who come into the UFC is that the biggest difference is UFC experience. We have a lot of these prospects that come into the UFC, and when they fight a guy who's been in there with the best of the best, when they fight a guy who's had multiple fights in the UFC, that experience and high-level experience, even if they don't have the most successful careers, tends to pay dividends, at least in 2024 and in the later parts of 2023. I think Drew Dober's definitely live to knock out Gene Silva, but I think Silva's more durable than Dober at this point. Even in fights where Dober hasn't gotten knocked out, we've seen him get rocked, we've seen him get wobbled, we've seen that he doesn't have the best ability to move his head. He's not the best defensive fighter. He's a good counter striker. He's a very good southpaw, throws that right hook, the left straight down the middle. He throws a good left straight to the body. He's good at working his way into the distance and getting into the pocket. I should say closing the distance and getting into the pocket. But Gene Silva has so much power. And yes, we picked him against Charles Jourdain, and I played that fight by submission or decision because we knew that Jourdain had never been knocked out. But again, this is kind of a similar thing with Drew Dober, where, you know, we've seen Jourdain get rocked and wobbled and then get taken down by the likes of Nathaniel Wood. We've seen him get hurt in other fights before, but nobody was able to put the finishing touches on it. I think Gene Silva can knock out Drew Dober because although the only person we've seen knock him out is Matt Favola, I think Gene Silva has that calmness and that patience, kind of like a Christian Rodriguez, to work his way into the pocket and defend a lot of the shots of Dober and then come right down the middle. I think that straight right hand, the 1-2 down the middle, you know, elbows from inside the clinch. I think he can knock Drew Dober out from like breaking off the clinch with an elbow. There's a lot of areas where I think Gene Silva can find the shot and knock him out. Would I be surprised if Dober found a KO? No. Would I be surprised if Dober won? No, man. Dober's one of the best of the best. You know, he just never really got to the top upper echelon of the division. I'm not saying Gene Silva's going to be at the top of the division, but I like his chances in this fight. I don't think he knocks out Drew Dober in round 1, but we did see Matt Favola do that. I believe it was the first round. Could have been the second round. You can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But I like the KO at plus 200, and I like Gene Silva by KO in round 2 and round 3. I think he's more of a, it's going to be more of a slow cooker style of performance where he's going to find his shots. He's going to hurt Dober in round 1. Dober's going to come back and land some good shots from southpaw, but eventually Silva's going to come right down the middle or crack him with a big elbow, and he's going to hurt him and then put him away. I'm going Gene Silva KO 2-3 at plus 550 along with the Gene Silva KO. I think Silva is the real deal. I don't want to count all my eggs in one basket because we've seen this happen time and time again, but I do think Gene Silva is going to get the job done. So I like Silva KO, and I like Silva KO 2-3 at plus 550. And then the final pick on my favorite plays is a very late addition to the card. It's a battle between Evan Elder and Darius Flowers. I like Evan Elder by sub here. I like sub 2-3. I could see him getting subbed in the first round. Darius Flowers is a great striker, comes down, you know, closes the distance, can land some good uppercuts and hooks. He's kind of like a dirty boxing style of fighter, fighting out of my neck of the woods as well in Chicago, Illinois. So he likes to come down the middle. He likes to walk his way into the pocket, almost has like a Philly shell, like a poor man's version of a Philly shell, can come up the middle, can come around the side, and he can clip and hurt Evan Elder. But Evan Elder's a very good striker. He's light on the feet. He lands good 1-2s down the middle. He has good wrestling. He has really solid takedowns. And like I said, he's not afraid to strike it out on the feet. A lot of Evan Elder's finishes end up coming by KO, and I think that people think that he's not going to look to grapple at all. But he can get ground and pound TKOs. And I haven't watched a ton of his old fights, but I would guarantee you that some of his finishes that were by KO probably came by ground and pound. And I think Elder knows by looking at the Jake Matthews fight that, you know, Darius Flowers can be taken down. He's not the easiest guy in the world to get down, but he can be taken down. He can be controlled. I think Evan Elder can, you know, slice through his guard, get takedowns, land ground and pound. And I think eventually Darius Flowers could give up his neck just like he did against Jake Matthews. I think that the smarter version of Evan Elder in this fight uses his striking to close the distance and get to his wrestling and takedowns. I think if Evan Elder gets a finish here, it's not going to be a first round finish. So I like the sub for Evan Elder over Darius Flowers. And I think that, like I said, the path to victory is there. Even watching the tape, look at the Jake Matthews fight. I think we're going to see Elder strike it out with Flowers on the feet and eventually use that to close the distance, get the takedowns, land some ground and pound, control the position. I think Elder's either going to get an arm triangle or he's going to find his way to the back of Darius Flowers as Flowers tries to explode. And I think he gets a choke of some sort, either an arm triangle or a rear naked choke in round 2 or round 3. I know it's short notice. You can't have a ton of success, but Elder's a minus 400, minus 450 favorite. So being able to find a plus 600 line on a guy who's a huge favorite, I think it's worth a sprinkle for the Evan Elder by sub in rounds 2 and round 3 at plus 600. So that's it for my favorite plays. Let's move on to the long shots segment of the video. All right, and for the long shot segment, I mean, you can see everything on your screen. We're going to go down the list and give you my reasoning behind each of the picks I have listed here for you. Up first, Joshua Van KO 2-3 plus 1,000. Is it likely that the fight with Johnson goes to decision? I would say so, but we've seen Charles Johnson get rocked and get hurt before. We've also seen Joshua Van get hurt in multiple fights. Well, not in multiple fights, but we saw him get clipped and get rocked by Kevin Borjas, and then he came back. He got into his rhythm. He found his shots. He closed the distance. He put his combinations together, and he started putting a whooping on his opponent. And I think that's what we're going to see here against Charles Johnson. I like Charles Johnson. I've picked him in plenty of fights before. But the one thing I will tell you is that Charles Johnson always fights close with his opponent. Even in the fight he just won against Jake Hadley, he won the fight down the stretch. That was probably one of the more, I would say, close victories, or I'm sorry, one of the more clear victories for Johnson, but a lot of the times it's 2 rounds to 1. It's a greasy split decision. The only real finish we've seen Charles Johnson get in the UFC was over the ghost of Jimmy Flick, and we know that Jimmy Flick does not like to get hit, and we've seen him get finished plenty of times. I'm very surprised that Nate Maness wasn't able to finish Jimmy Flick in his last fight, but that is what it is. I think Josh Van's ability to close the distance, get in the pocket, rip the body shots, come back up top with combinations, strike off the break with head kicks, land head kicks as the opponent's circling out up against the cage to cut off his exit strategies. I think he can hurt Charles Johnson to the body. I think he can hurt him to the chin, and I think it would probably come later on in the matchup. I don't think it's going to be like a first round KO or anything. So at plus 1,000, I mean 10 to 1, I think you gotta sprinkle Josh Van KO 2-3 in this fight. I think he can hurt a guy like Charles Johnson. His boxing, his ability to close the distance, again, something we've talked about in this video already, the calmness of certain fighters. I think Josh Van's gonna pick it up slowly but surely, and build and build and build and build, and eventually get a TKO, hitting him to the body and hurting him, and then crumbling him up top to the head, or hurting him to the head and rocking him, and then as Charles Johnson covers up, he rips to the body and then drops him and gets him out of there. So I like Josh Van KO 2-3 at plus 1,000, and like I said, these numbers, I just looked at these numbers less than 20 minutes ago, so they are still, live if you want to grab these numbers before tomorrow. Up next, Fatima Klein, KO 2-3 at plus 2,600. Obviously, you see the number. It's long shots for a reason. The only reason I think I like this play over the sub is because I've seen Jasmine Jasudavicius get hurt so many times. Yes, she's great. I never pick against Jasudavicius, but the longer that I've watched tape on this Klein girl, I think she's the real deal. She has good grappling, good takedowns, good ability to take the back. She can go for submissions. She has a lot of grappling tournament wins by submission, but her striking is very solid. She cuts off the ring very well, or cuts off the cage. She circles well. She doesn't really overextend or overcommit on too many of her shots. It's jabs, it's 1-2s down the middle. She's a CFFC champion. I mean, a lot of very successful UFC fighters have come out of that CFFC promotion, and I think it's going to be the same thing here with Fatima Klein, man. I think she can get an attritional finish over a girl who gets hit as much as Jasudavicius. She can land good combinations, that 1-2 down the middle. Like I said, Jasudavicius doesn't really have defense. It's pretty much non-existent. She gets hit, she gets clipped, and she gets hurt, and then she just pushes through it and goes on to break her opponent in round 2 and break the opponent in round 3 with wrestling, forward pressure, takedowns, combinations. And I don't think she's going to be able to break a girl like Fatima Klein. I really don't. I think Klein is going to be able to move well, find her angles, find the shots, and I think she could definitely TKO Jasudavicius. Now, it's at plus 2,600. It's a long shot for a reason, but I think a sprinkle on Fatima Klein KO 2-3 against a girl who's as hittable and as, I guess you could say, rockable, but we haven't seen her get rocked too much, so I'm just going to say as hittable as Jasudavicius as she walks forward and tries to close the distance. She kind of has that zombie style to her, and we love her for it, but I think against a technician and a striker who's as technical as Klein, she could be in for some trouble. So I like Fatima Klein KO 2-3 plus 2,600. Up next, Angelusa KO round 2 at plus 2,200, 22 to 1. I think that Gabriel Bonfim wins, but I kind of think both of the Bonfim brothers are frauds. And after that loss to Nicholas Dalby, I mean, we know how good Dalby is. He looked good and arguably could have won his last fight against Rinat Fakhretdinov. But, I think Angelusa has the power on the feet to hurt a guy like Bonfim. Does he have the grappling to compete with him on the mat? No. Is he probably going to get taken down? Yes. Could he get ground and pounded? Yes, absolutely. But I think if Lusa can survive round 1 and start to get Bonfim tired, I think that's where Lusa can crack him. I mean, Lusa has big power, big overhands, big hooks, big uppercuts, good 1-2s down the middle, and I think he can crack the chin of Gabriel Bonfim. Now, am I picking him to win the fight? No. But again, this is a long shot segment. I think he has the power to last in the first round, round and a half, and then later on in that second round, start to make Bonfim slow down, have him huffing and puffing, and crack him with a big shot and make him want to quit. So at 22-1, I'll take my chances on an Angelusa KO in round 2. We have Bonfim KO 1-2. Again, this is the same thing where everybody's expecting him to take down Angelusa and get a submission. I think he could flatten out Angelusa and get a ground and pound TKO. I think he could take his back, flatten him out, and just rain down ground and pound, and Lusa can't get up. And I also think he is the more technical striker on the feet, and we've seen Lusa get hurt. We've seen him get rocked. We've seen him get wobbled. I know that everybody's expecting a submission from Bonfim, and it makes sense, but Bonfim has technical striking, and he has some pop on his shots. I could easily see him clipping the chin of Angelusa, having him hurt and wobbly, and then landing 2 or 3 more shots and putting him down. So at plus 950, kind of like the plus 2200, it's a value play. I think Bonfim KO 1-2 at plus 950 is a great number, because if Bonfim wins, it's probably going to be in the first 2 rounds, because he will slow down if he's not able to get that finish. But I think at plus 950, why not take a sprinkle on the KO? Just because he always gets subs doesn't mean he can't strike, and we've seen his striking. I mean, this guy can throw decent boxing combinations, and I think it's live at plus 950. So Bonfim KO 1-2 plus 950, Angelusa KO round 2 plus 2200. Those are some good plays and good targets for that fight. And the next fight up is going to be in the Damon Blackshear and Montel Jackson fight. I've seen a lot of footage of Damon Blackshear training over at Tiger Muay Thai. He's working on his striking. He's probably going to want to showcase his striking against Montel Jackson, but even though I don't think Jackson's the greatest striker, he keeps his base pretty low, and he has good 1-2s down the middle. He uses his jab very well from southpaw. He has a very stiff jab that can hurt opponents, and I think it could hurt Blackshear. But I think the sub round 2, round 3, I don't think there's a first round finish from either of these guys, so I just eliminate round 1 completely, whether you're on the Blackshear or the Montel Jackson side. I'm not super keen on this fight being a finish, but I think Blackshear can slow down a fighter like Montel Jackson, be comfortable enough on the feet to strike with him, and then use that to get into his wrestling, you know, get some takedowns, win the scrambles against Montel Jackson. And I think he can slow down a guy like Jackson in round 2 and in round 3, and I think he probably slows him down enough to find his way to the back, find his way to an arm triangle, land some ground and pound, find a way to sink the hooks in when Montel Jackson gives up his back and locks in a rear naked choke. I think it's either a rear naked choke or potentially a guillotine, you know, as Jackson kind of starts to slow down and Damon Blackshear starts to put some combinations together on the feet. Maybe it, you know, gets Montel Jackson a little bit gun shy and a little bit, you know, I wouldn't say a little bit gun shy, but gets him a little bit overzealous and has him doing things that he wouldn't normally do because he's not expecting Damon Blackshear to be able to strike with him on the feet. Once he starts having some success, he's probably going to look to wrestle, and I think that that could open up a guillotine. It could open up for Damon Blackshear to sprawl and win the scrambles and wind up on top, and then go for a rear naked choke as he puts the hooks in on the back. Go for an arm triangle choke as he gets to that top position and lands some ground and pound. Maybe he lands ground and pound in the mount. Jackson tries to get up on a hip to get out, and then he grabs that arm triangle choke and gets a sub. I think, again, just like the Josh Van at plus 1,000, this is also plus 1,000, 10-1. I think Damon Blackshear sub 2-3. I think if it's a finish, I think it's a sub for Blackshear. We've seen him get subs in his career before, and he's one of the only other fighters in the UFC besides Bryce Mitchell and the Korean Zombie to get a twister submission in the UFC. So the guy's got really solid grappling, and he is no joke. And he got that submission over Jose Johnson, who's not amazing, but I mean, he looked pretty good against Asu Almabayev in his last fight. So, you know, you got to give Damon Blackshear some credit with that one. But I like Blackshear sub 2-3. I think he can find his way to the back. I think he can find a way to win a scramble, slow down Montel Jackson, and get a submission in the second half of this fight. So Blackshaw sub 2-3 at plus 1,000 is the long shot play for that specific fight, and that's also on short notice, so I think it's definitely possible there. And my final long shot play is one that I don't think is going to be too popular, especially after she struggled to make weight, but it's Tracy Cortez by KO or submission over Rose Namajunas. Now, you're probably going to say I'm a hypocrite. And you'd kind of be right, because on my podcast, I picked Rose Namajunas to win. I think Rose Namajunas wins this fight. I think she's more technical. I think she's the better grappler, but I said in my breakdown that Tracy Cortez is legit. She throws good boxing combinations, and she has a lot of pop in her shots. She throws with very, decent power when she puts her combinations together. And I think based on the fact that we never know what kind of Rose is going to show up. Is it going to be the Rose that head kicked Wei Li in round 1? Is it going to be the Rose that finished Joanna Jędrzejczyk in the first round? Is it going to be the Rose who won a decision against Zhang Wei Li who shows up? Or is it going to be the Rose who won against Amanda Ribas but kind of slowed down towards the later half of that fight? Is it going to be the Rose Namajunas from the Carla Esparza fight where it was just basically a stare in the mirror match and, Esparza won the title without actually winning the title? You never know. And I think based on the fact that you can never know what Rose is going to show up, I think the better wrestler in this fight is Tracy Cortez. I think she has better wrestling, better grappling. She's working with Brandon Olivas, who we had on the show before, out at Fight Ready, working with Santino DeFranco. Yes, she's coming in on short notice, but I think Cortez is legit. Now, do I think she's going to be a world champion? I don't know. This fight's really going to be the litmus test to see how good Cortez can be, but when you have to worry about the mental fragility of Rose Namajunas, and I'm one of the biggest Rose fans there are. I mean, just listen to my podcast from day one. I think you have to take a stab on Tracy Cortez, whether you take the money line at plus 180 or plus 190 or take the inside the distance. Again, I think at plus 800, she could get a submission. She could get a ground and pound TKO. She could land a big shot on the chin of Namajunas and hurt her. We just don't know what type of Rose is going to show up in this fight. And based on the fact, again, that I don't like the Rose we've seen since Trevor Whitman hasn't been in her corner, and I don't think he's going to be there this time either. I don't like Rose without Trevor Whitman. I think Rose with Whitman is the best Rose she's ever been. And, obviously she knows the best and she knows what's best for her, but I don't like that either. And that's, again, pushing me more towards the side of Tracy Cortez, whether it's money line or ITD. But I think Tracy Cortez inside the distance plus 800, she could get takedowns and wear down Rose in the second, third, and fourth. She could get a submission potentially. I think the sub would probably come from Rose Namajunas, but Cortez is a good jiu-jitsu artist as well and has good pop on her shots. Or she could get a ground and pound finish here because I believe her to be the better wrestler. So the final long shot play is Tracy Cortez inside the distance over Rose Namajunas. I don't love it. That's why I mentioned it last. It's also the main event, so it works out. But I think Cortez is live to find a finish against Rose, and I think it's more based on the mentality of Rose and the question marks, along with the fact that she doesn't have Trevor Whitman anymore. But yeah, I wouldn't play Rose at minus 200, minus 250 in this spot. I think it's a Cortez play or a Cortez inside the distance dog or pass situation. So yeah, the final play, Tracy Cortez inside the distance. I think she could get a ground and pound finish. I think she could find a sub if she slows Rose down with the wrestling and wrestling pressure in second, third, and fourth round. I think she could find a finish. So Tracy Cortez inside the distance at plus 800. All right, that is it for my betting breakdown for UFC Denver, Namajunas versus Cortez. I gave you my long shots. I gave you my favorite plays. I gave you about 11, 12, 13 plays on this video. The fight night takes place tomorrow night from Denver, Colorado at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time for the prelims. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out. Let's make some money tomorrow night at UFC Denver.